Okay, we got Shane B and Beth B. I don't. Does anybody say that? Beth B.
You just did.
That's what
Yeah.
we're. This is awesome to have both you guys here. And true story, All Sufficient Merit. We led it at our church back in Houston. I live in Dallas now, but back in Houston, I did not know who wrote that, which is just fun.
Wow.
It sounds like a song that has like been around. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like that type of song. So that's true story. I'm not just saying that. I love this song. This is a songwriting like series. So, you know, I'm always just curious. And I think a lot of the men and women watching who are, you know, either songwriters or wanting to be songwriters are curious as well, like how these songs come to be, you know? And sometimes they have these massive, robust stories that go on for years. Sometimes it's like, hey, in a simple moment, God gave us this. Would you start by just walking us through like where did this come from?
Yeah. All Sufficient Merit happened because I went on a walk, which is funny that you were like, you know, let's walk through this, because I would say lyrics usually are what happened for me first. And not even just like writing down lyrics, but kind of like if a thought, if a melody with words that, you know, go really well with it, and it feels like a nugget, like that usually kind of like the first verse of the first stanza, something will come first for me.
Yeah.
And so I was on a walk, and I think that the line, you know, all sufficient or it wasn't that melody, but I'll get to that later. Shining like the sun, a fortune I inherit by no work I've done. And I was like, oh, I really like that. Oh, that's fun. And I just put my voice memo on, you know, as I walked laps around our park. And there is something to that, not to get into like the neuroscience, but, you know,
Get into it. Yeah.
walking and running is so good for, obviously exercise is good, but I think that there's something about the both sides, my sisters. Anyway, who wants to know this? I can't even.
I don't know anything about this. This is awesome.
Science.
I love it.
I actually
I love it.
don't
Teach
know,
us.
but she's told me, she's like, it's really it lights up a different part of your brain, even when you go on a jog.
Just
like
by
it's
moving.
okay to listen to something, but actually it does something neurologically for you to hear that. It's kind of like swinging on a swing set.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I love it.
I believe
So
in science.
there's something about, for me, that honestly, when I've been stuck on a lyric, or I have this idea, or even I'm just on a walk, there will be song things.
Yeah.
So that's a big,
That's
for me,
common for
big
you.
recommendation is like, because I think
love
there's
that.
space, but you're in motion. So anyway, I had my voice memo.
If your sister's
Open.
watching, she's gonna
She's
sign up like,
oh
yes.
my gosh, Beth.
You got it right, Beth.
So a lyric just kind of kept happening. Like, I think just for me, from really struggling with that, like feeling like I need to do more, but intellectually, biblically knowing I don't need to do more.
Yeah.
And places in the Bible that I've really gone and sat in, or, you know, fathers of like Reformed theology, you know, I've read biographies on Martin Luther, who had OCD and scrupulosity, which I struggle with. So there's kind of this, like, I think I was in a place of processing that. And so then phrases and thoughts of what does that mean started fleshing out.
Yeah.
And I think once the rhythm was there of the stanzas, there were like 8, you know, in this walk. And then like different lines or ideas of like, maybe I like this more. And so there was a note on my phone, there's a voice memo, and then, and there was a melody to it. And I went home and sang it, I think. And I sent Shane the voice memo of me singing it, and then the note. And, you know, I love my husband, but he isn't someone who's like, okay, I'm just going to go into a quiet room and listen to this and give you my feedback. He's like, that's great. You know, we're probably just in this like busy season, and I really loved it. And I think he heard it, but it was kind of like, you know, it went dormant. Like, it was on my phone. I didn't have a project coming
For
in.
months at a time. Like this.
Oh, yeah, at least
Really?
a year. So it was just on my phone living, and I'm like, I think as a writer and as a lyricist, and as like seeing that positionally as, you know, pastoral in the way of like, gosh, I think this would be so great to sing corporately, you know, about this benefit of Christ.
Yep.
And so it kind of would come up here and there, and it was still on my phone. And then one day, but not the story, just the technique.
Not the story. It's hard not to go to the heart of it, because
y'all go to whatever you want to go to.
Because 2 Corinthians 5:21 is one of my favorite passages, and one of the hardest passages for me. That God made him, He made him who knew no sin, to be sin on our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God. It's this great exchange thing. And just as a sinner who still has the residue of sin, that's a hard thing to believe. And so I'm in the stairwell. So what the track around the park is to Beth, the stairwell is to me. And I'm getting ready for a Psalms, Hymns, and Spiritual Songs live recording. And I remembered that there was a moment in time where my wife shared with me a hymn, and I only remember that one time. There's only been one hymn, like where she said, I wrote a hymn. I had no recollection of it. And she's right. I mean, I didn't hear it. I heard things, but you know, I'm just as spacey as it gets. So I had her text it to me, and I read, all sufficient merit, shining like the sun, a fortune I inherit by no work I have done. My righteousness I forfeit at my Savior's cross, where all sufficient merit did what I could not. And I was like, and I texted her. I'm like, are you secretly 500 years old? And, you know, yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, she's a decade younger than me, but it's like, who are you? And that's, as I started to read, and I felt like I was reading something that was ancient, because it was the same thing as an old hymn. You know, you always have these 8 stanzas, and you're like, well, which one am I going to do? I can't do 8 of them. So then I'm just reading through it. And a buddy of mine, Brian Fowler, was actually sitting next to me as we were doing this. And so it was, and almost the first thing I sang landed. So the melody of what it is now. It actually had, it was all sufficient merit.
No, all sufficient merit.
That's what I wrote first.
It was hard.
Which I really loved, and it was real hymny and beautiful. But then it was like, I think we wanted it to be singable for, you know, for folks. 100%. And so, but we came around kind of like Beth's thoughts around, in my opinion, 2 Corinthians 5:21, the merit of Christ. Like, He didn't just save us, take our sin. He actually gave us His life. And we just kind of came around those thoughts. Wrote a couple of verses, wrote a chorus, you know, together, kind of tweaked little words here and there, you know, and little phrases. And
so it is done, it is finished, is the chorus of that song, right? So that came.
That wasn't mine. That was from Shane and Brian.
Yeah.
And so I only had the verses, like all of those. And that was hard. I think in songwriting too, as you collaborate, because I'm not inclined to like the big anthem choruses or being brief, you know, so, and just kind of to the point. And so I would say, you know, I had for so long had these words and became really attached to them and had gone back and tweaked them and all of that. So then for it to be put in the hands of Shane and Brian, who are thinking corporately and like, okay, like, where's the big chorus, or where's the, like, okay, let's change that word. And I think, you know, that's a worthwhile practice, but it was hard. There were a couple days there where I would be sent a couple voice memos and I'm like, I don't like it. You know, not even because it wasn't good. I think just even subjectively just going like, ah. So that was it was a rewarding experience to have. Really, at the end of the day, it's like the content and what we're being reminded of together as the body very much is intact and better, but just kind of fighting for it and them being flexible and going, okay, cool, like let's ditch that line, let's fight for another one. So it was very collaborative, and it feels like the song became what it was supposed to be, which it wasn't that for years, you know.
I remember writing I was alone, and I had a little bit of a fire in me, just for them talking about the root of songwriting, to turn the word debt into, there's some hymns with that word debt, and some songs that I know with that word debt, and I think they're good. I mean, and I understand the sentiment, but when I think of that transactional word, I'm like, I want to say that the debt I owed was no longer there. So I wanted to kind of go, you know, other songs are saying, you know, I owe this debt. And I think some of the mystery of the cross is like that. There's no
more debt.
There's no more debt there in that account. You're good. You're paid for completely. And so I had this moment where it's like, that language happened, and then it is done, it is finished. That little kind of 3 minor moment happened, and then it just was like all of a sudden it was just a chorus of like his merit is now my own. You know, my debt fell on him. It's paid for. It's finished. There's a 3 minor chord that felt great. Boom. You know.
Well, and I mean, obviously we're shooting a video about it. I love the song, and it meant a lot to my church long before I knew you guys wrote it. It feels like, and if, you know, just to close, like if we define a hymn as primarily revealing who God is and his character, his nature, what he has done for us. I know there's maybe some other definitions there. This song does that. The chorus then continues that thought, but it allows me to also celebrate it in a way that moves me into more of a spiritual song. And we got other videos that were talking about that stuff.
Yeah.
All that to say, really cool to hear how this song came about. So appreciate you guys sharing that.
Thanks for having me.